Hey, Lyssa here. Thank you for checking into the coaching studio. And I'm honored today to introduce my guest, Cynthia Loy Darst. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we get into it. So Cynthia has an MFA, which I'm really curious about for another conversation, a CPCC, an ORSCC, and her MCC. In fact, Cynthia was one of the first 8 people in the world to get the MCC designation. So woo, 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 you. Cynthia was named one of the top 10 most influential coaches in the United States. She has a playful and inspiring style, working with all kinds of people to move them past limitations and into action and fulfillment. Cynthia is passionate about the quality and excellence of the world of coaching, and as a result of that has served on as a founding member of the International Coaching Federation, as well as served on the board of directors, and has also been a member of the Professional Coaches and Mentor Association, and is also the past president of the Association of Coach Training Organizations. She's also the author of Meet Your Inside Team, How to Turn Internal Conflict into Clarity and Move Forward with Your Life. It's pretty awesome, right? And she's also done, and one more thing with this Ronco set of knives, she's also done a TED Talk called Safe Inside Yourself. And I'll be putting links to all of these things in the information below. I want to really quickly read a book review of her book, which I think is brilliant. Meet Your Inside Team, How to Turn Internal Conflict into Clarity and Move Forward with Your Life. The book review is, what if your inner critic voices were actually wise messengers in disguise? Discover how to mine their voices for nuggets of gold and how to make peace with their presence in your life. These voices probably aren't going away, but now I have a new revolutionary tools to get my inside team working on my agenda, not theirs. Some steps were playful, others profound, and I could apply them immediately. And this was an Amazon review that I thought was just so lovely. So congratulations on your book, and also, a great review. I am really curious. So Cynthia, thank you so much for being here today with me. And
Well, thank you for inviting me. Let me just say thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to connect with you, Lyssa.
it's really, this is going to be fun. So you have a long history with the International Coaching Federation, given the fact that you're a founding member and one of the first of 8 MCCs in the world. What got you into coaching? Like what was that journey into coaching for you?
Well, it was, you're taking me back to the very beginning of, because the coaching profession back in those days, it wasn't founded. Nobody knew what coaching was. So there was this, I was there because I had been a professional actor in New York. And I had found out about something called career consultants for professional actors. Actors Information Project was this place I went. And the very first person that I met when I got there was Henry House, now known as Henry Kimsey House, who's one of the 3 founders of the Coaches Training Institute. So I connected with him. That was back in 1986, for God's sake.
Holy moly.
Yeah, fast forward a few years, I made my living as an actor. I decided to leave that because there was something in my purpose that wasn't quite aligned there, and bit by bit, I made my way into being curious about what Henry was up to. And by this point, in 1992, he and Laura Whitworth had started creating a coach training. Laura had worked with Thomas Leonard before that, who's considered one of the pioneers in the field of coaching. And so I was like, well, what are you guys doing? Let me go do this class. I was just curious. And it was so, even then, even in the very second class that was ever delivered in coach training, I was like, oh, there's something here. This is interesting. and it felt more in line with me than what all of the different. I've been in acting, I've been in sales, I've been in, it was like, oh yeah, this is the path.
Yeah.
So
So there was like something that just sort of like cha-chink resonated inside of you. This is it.
exactly.
You know what I
Exactly.
love is I'm hearing you say this also is just the circuitous path that we sometimes take to get to our purpose. And I heard you use that word purpose, right? How did you determine that coaching really was your purpose?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's like it's a great question. It's what so one of the things that I realized as I started getting coached myself was that what had drawn me to acting was that I was extremely curious about how people think.
Mhm.
And I loved having conversations where you're creating and learning about characters and finding out about the dynamics of relationship and all of these different things. Well, hello, if that, like, no, no wonder I was like, no wonder coaching felt like a fit. I wanted to work with people that were everyday normal human beings who knew they wanted change in life, knew they wanted something more, didn't know quite what the piece of the puzzle was to support, and so that's what now I get to have these rich conversations with people and sort of pull things apart so that they can find their best ways forward. Right? That to me is really fun.
Yeah, no, and it really, I mean, your energy just is like totally there. It's like, I think you found your calling.
Right?
How do you feel how do you feel when you think about your life and you had this whole life that was pretty robust going into coaching, right? And then you've had this life since coaching, which has been really robust. How do you feel coaching has impacted you personally within your own life?
Huge, huge. So you were mentioning my TED talk earlier. It's called, Safe Inside Yourself. Most of my early years, I was not safe inside myself. I was terrified. I was always looking for, how do I look good here? What's the right move? I was very, some of self-critical, like saboteur,
External,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
externally motivated, right? Like, what are all those voices out here telling me about myself? Is
Totally, totally. And by getting coached myself, it's been layer after layer
Mhm.
of pulling that apart, getting more in touch with what at CTI we call our leader within, our core. Who is my core? What do I believe? What fulfills me? What
Mhm.
do I choose? How do I be responsible for my life? So years of that have me now in a place where I love the work I do. I engage well. I have nothing to prove. I To me that is a blessing.
And I think it really speaks to the fact, I think most of us, that's part of our journey is letting go of other people's other people's thoughts about us and our thoughts about what we think they think about us, because often they're so busy thinking about themselves that they don't really have time to even think about us. But we create that narrative, right? Will Cynthia like me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have no idea how it was for you, but for me, I was brought up to be a wonderful codependent person. And and so everything was about, what do they think? How do they feel? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Now it's very clear to me, like, you get to be you, I get to be me. I'm responsible for my feelings, you're responsible for yours. Let's have a conversation here.
Yeah, I honestly think it's one of the most important psychological evolutions we go through in life is this sense of not do you like me, but the transforming from do you like me to do I like myself? And
Yeah.
then do I like
Yeah.
you? Right. So we're making conscious choices, not only about ourselves, but about the people we choose to have around us. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful.
Yes.
What do you think when you think about the work that you're doing? What is really keeping your passion alive around coaching?
Well, one of the things that I do, I have been instrumental in helping to develop leaders for both CRR Global and CTI. And right now, I actively have a position where I'm, kind of bringing in new leaders, where I'm working with our senior leaders to keep them on their toe. Like all of this, to me, I actually not only love coaching very much, I love coach training.
Yeah.
And I love working with the human who really wants to be able to communicate better, to be able to listen better, and to help them get their hands on that kind of technology, that kind of where do you put your attention? What are you really listening for? How do you not come with your own ideas of what that person should do, but really kind of help them unfold and unpack the way they're thinking, right?
Yeah. Mhm. Well, and that's really, in many ways, that's really the MCC journey, isn't it? It's the transformational journey within the coach first,
Yeah.
to letting go of the attachment to what we think. I used to say a long time ago, because I did a lot of marriage and couples work, and I would say, expectations or what's the word I'm really looking for? Potential. Like we fall in love with potential, but it's like it doesn't matter what my ideas of your potential are if it's not of interest to you, right? And so as a coach, how do I let go of the idea that you potentially could be anything in the world, but rather be with where you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. I love where you're pointing. Here's a metaphor that I use for this. So we as humans, most of us have no problem that a horse is not more like a bird.
Right. We're
Right? Not
comfortable
a
with
problem.
that.
Not a problem that your dog isn't more like your horse.
Right.
Right? Whatever. Like they're not a problem. A lizard can be a lizard. However, with humans, it's easy to think that a successful human is supposed to look like this, right? Like this little exactly. And how can I allow this human that I'm working with to be a lizard while this one's a bird and this one's a horse? Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I love that because I mean, it's sort of funny. We could go off on this for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
really long
yeah.
time.
Sure,
And
sure.
so there may be a follow-up conversation around this, but I think it really is that sense of how do we allow people to be who they need to be versus who we think they need to be.
Yes,
Right. It's
yes.
beautiful. It's really
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, and this really leads into my next question. What is something that you think all coaches need to understand? And it may be a riff off of what we've just started having a conversation around, but especially those who are moving from, you know, calling themselves a coach to actually getting coach training to then going from being a certified professional coach to an ACC, then a PCC, and maybe ultimately an MCC. What is it that what words of wisdom would you have for them?
Oh, I appreciate that. I think it is a little bit of building off of what we're saying. So one of the things that I often see coaches doing, and they don't mean to, but but and maybe I do it myself sometimes, is that we get attached to what
Mhm.
the client says they want. And if our attention goes to I'm committed to getting a new job, right? I This is what I want. This is what I'm coming to coaching for. My client they want to make this career leap. That's it. If my attention goes there too much, I'm actually going to miss what's going on with my client.
Right.
So sometimes when I'm working with someone who's never been coached before, I actually, part of the Designed Alliance is to say, I need to tell you, I'm going to be more committed to you than what you say you want. If we get here, great. I don't really care. I'm interested in you. I'm interested in your development. I'm interested in you becoming the human that you want to become. That's more important.
Just so you know, I'm going to totally steal that at this point. What I think is beautiful about that is, one, it's really solid agreement setting, right, around the relationship that we're going to have.
Mhm.
I used to say to couples, look, until you guys tell me otherwise, your relationship is my client, right? It's the same thing though. I'm always going to be more committed to you than your topic. I want you to have that exploration. I love that, Cynthia. I am definitely stealing that. What is one of the biggest misconceptions around coaching that you find?
Oh, I think this is one that most coaches find, is that people still, it's getting better, but people still think that the coach is going to tell them what to do or be like, so generally speaking, oh yeah, I don't need any more tips, like like that I somehow, and so so this, I guess this is another thing that I talk to my clients about. I hold my clients are a master of their own life. Like right now, you know your life. We're just meeting. How in the world I would presume to think I would know what you need or what you want or what you're is ridiculous. The the more that I can hold my client as a master in how they work, and allow myself to be curious, to reflect back, to notice something that I point out so that they can see it. That's cool. That to me is what coaching is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there's been a really interesting thing that's happened in coaching, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this.
Uh-huh.
But everybody wants to call themselves a coach, because, they're really good at having friend conversations, right? So like that's coaching. But what they do is exactly what you're talking about, which is they do a lot of talking, telling, educating, basically, if you do this, then you'll get that result, without any sense of the fact that the other person's the expert in their own life. They're the master of themselves.
Right?
So how did you learn to throttle that piece back, which seems so culturally inundated across the planet? Because I listen to coaches from every part of the world, right? And that is like the hardest thing for people to get, is that their value doesn't come in what they're telling people to do.
Oh, right, right. Oh, I love where you're pointing. It's a very normal struggle for a new coach, is to think that like most of the world is so trained that problem solving is of great value, right? And so if you've been in that world and you've been a problem solver, to start to translate, how do I provide value here? It's a really challenging question, right?
Yeah.
So part of what, in the way that I train coaches, and primarily this is through the lens of Coactive Training Institute, is that we actually train in our very first session how you are listening. Are you listening for the person says this thing, and here's my great idea, here's how I relate to that? We call that level 1 listening, self-focus. Or am I really listening, level 2, am I listening for, what is this person saying? What are their goals? What do they want? What's important to them? And when I put my attention and awareness there, then level 1 can move back. It doesn't mean I won't have it.
Right.
It just means let me move that back. Let me self-manage to focus over here.
Yeah. And I think we can always use our ideas or what shows up for us to inform our curiosity. So, I mean, if the client seems to have missed some big gaping hole by the end of a conversation, it's not like you're not allowed to say, and I noticed that you never mentioned anything about this. Is there anything useful in there? And if not, we'll move on. Where do we go next? Right?
Exactly. So it's not like you're divorcing your brain. It's not like you're only asking questions, but it is. But it is. Just what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Informed curiosity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we're talking, I'm wondering, how do you take care of yourself as a coach? Like, are there any practices that you have that you use to keep your coaching, I don't know, clean, kind of like clean language or clean eating, clean coaching?
Oh, I love that that's a great question. One of the main things I believe that is important for me to do as a coach is to live a fulfilled life. So what I mean by that is to know my own values, to live life like right before we had our conversation today. I went and had a nice swim. I taking care of myself, taking care of my own time, my own energy, giving myself permission to do what works for my body, my way, right? Setting clear boundaries. And it's a fascinating thing because I started setting boundaries long ago around my coaching, and almost no one ever challenges those boundaries at all.
Right.
Just because they're clear to me.
And isn't that always the greatest problem? It's not the boundaries that we set that other people cross, although that does happen. It's the boundaries that we set that then we trample all over. I blocked this time in my calendar to swim, but look, I need to answer all these emails instead, right? Like that was me walking over that boundary. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of along the lines of then honoring your agreements to yourself also, right?
Yeah. And just building on this, one of the other things that I think is really important is having coaches myself. One, I've got my husband is a brilliant, particularly couples coach. He's lovely with that, but he's a wonderful coach, right? So sometimes I'll say, put your coaching hat on. Sometimes I will. When I was writing this book, took me forever to write this book. I had to hire a few different coaches because I needed different impact on it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a believer in walking the talk, and I also think that it doesn't matter how long I've been coaching. Sometimes I can't get out of here, and all of my good questions to myself I can't auto coach.
Well, it is a little like, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish, right? So, I mean, but I think that it's the irony that I see in coaching. And I saw it in therapy also, where you have people who are in these helping professions, but they're like, but I don't have one. Like, I don't need a coach. I just do coaching. And it's like, what are you telling your clients about the value of coaching if you don't have a coach?
Right.
Right? And if you don't have a self-reflective practice, I mean, I think it's one of the things that's genius about that new competency being added to the ICF competencies of a coaching mindset is that idea that we need that self-care. We need that self-reflective practice. And we also need to make sure we're doing our own work so we can show up, which is really what I hear you saying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So what is it that you're up to today that you would love to share with us?
What am I up to? Well,
what are you up to?
I've just moved, so I'm still in the process of setting up my new world, and I'm not super quick with that. I get so focused in my computer work that I often disregard what's around me, and that's something I have to keep working with. But it's an interesting thing. I think my primary focus these days is honestly with CTI. And what I'm hoping to do is some years ago, back in around 2010, I can't even believe it's been that long, 2010, 2012, I was offering trainings on the first way the inside team came into being was as a coach training. It was years later that I then found the way to write the book. And what I want to do, what I'm focused on doing, is by this fall starting to create coach training again using inside team. It's really a lovely process. And talk about, when you're talking about like self-awareness, let me just give you a basic thought about it. All right. So when I think self-awareness, like, what's that even mean? Right? Well, to me, that means noticing how I'm thinking, noticing what's going on. And if there's something going on in my life that I'm a little about, or that I'm trying to do, there's usually some kind of conversation that's happening. You know, now if I'm going to the grocery store this afternoon, the conversation is like, okay, what's for dinner? You know, what do I need to, you know, oh, we've got the chicken. Oh, you know, it's like there's a kind of like, and that's all fine and it works out and I know what to do. But for some things in our life, particularly the places where we keep saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then nothing happens or very little happens, that's usually a place where there's a bigger inside team conversation going on. And if we can honestly slow down, find out who's talking, what are they saying, what's the way they think this internal game is played.
And how are they sabotaging each other, or how are they supporting each other, right?
Right. And half the time they're all screaming at you. They're not even in relationship with each other. Right.
Right. And we tune them out because they're noisy.
That's right. That's right. And so then they keep getting louder, particularly the ones that are all freaked out and think you're going to die any minute. Right.
Well, survival is sort of one of those important things, and our brain knows it'll get our attention if we feel like we're at death's door.
Right.
You know.
Right. So even as a coach, when I'm going to bring this back to like coaching mindset, coaching. So as a coach, what is my inside team? What is my awareness on myself? Who's the part of me that knows how to be really curious? Who's the part of me that brings compassion to every call? Right? Who's the part of me that sometimes needs to be bold and forthright in saying something I'm seeing? And how do I let that person, right? So it's not just one thing. You know, it's not just coach. It's all of these different, it's like a coaching inside team, if you will.
Yeah.
That I'm going to bring to the
coaching.
call.
Yeah. I think that is so important, because I think we like to pretend like we're just one thing and not the multifaceted thing that we are, right? And you know, how do we create clarity and awareness around these different parts of ourselves, these different voices, so that we can be at choice consciously about how we want to be in the world, how we want to be coach, how we want to. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier, you know, is this me having an idea about what you need to do? What part of me has decided that it knows what you need to do versus the part of me that is like, I really want to be useful? And that's something I talk about with the students that I work with, is really like, it's not like there's a bad question. It's just, there's a scale of usefulness, right? And so how useful is that question? And how useful is that mindset? And so being really aware, I love that. I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah. Beautiful. You know, there's just in what you're saying there, there's also like, as I'm curious, am I curious for my own understanding?
Ding,
Like,
ding, ding.
where did you buy that shirt? That's a question for me,
Right.
but to say, oh my God, Lyssa, this painting behind you, what's the essence of that? What does it spark in you? Something, it's like, to my job as a coach is to evoke the curiosity of my
Yes.
client for
Yes.
themselves.
Yes. 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 Because if their brain doesn't light up for it, they don't get to retain it.
Right?
Right. If my
Right?
brain is lit up, great, but I don't need to retain it. They need to retain it. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And you're right. Like, what is the meaning of this thing behind me for me
For
versus
you.
what the meaning that someone else is making? Yeah,
Right.
brilliant. Just really brilliant. Oh, Cynthia, I think we could probably go on for a really long time.
Oh
So we
my
may
God,
have to have
right.
another conversation. But I just so much appreciate you being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
This has been, it's been a gift to connect with you. And one of the things that excites and thrills me is when I meet other MCCs that who with whom it's very clear that they're doing beautiful coaching work in this world. And you, my darling, are one of those.
Well, thank you for saying so, and I appreciate it. And definitely, it is definitely a mutual respect going on here. I'm really just, I think there's just so much to learn from different people, and I just feel so privileged to have the opportunity to have the conversations.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
And thank you to our viewers or listeners for being here with us today. You can find out more about Cynthia below. I'll have links to her book. I'll have links to her TED Talk as well as to her website so that you can hear more or find out more about darstteam.com. So yeah, so that you can go and find out more about Cynthia and the work that she's doing. And thank you again so much for being here today.